The year 2020 was one for the history books. It was a year that tested the resilience of nations and individuals alike. It wasn't just the pandemic that gripped the world, it was the economic freefall that followed. Businesses closed their doors, and the streets were eerily empty. When Joe Biden took office in January 2021, the United States was staring into the abyss of a recession. Businesses were shuttered, millions were jobless. The economic landscape was bleak, and the challenges ahead seemed insurmountable. The stock market was reeling, investors were anxious, and the financial markets were in turmoil. It was a moment of profound uncertainty. People were glued to their screens, watching the news, hoping for some sign of stability. The pandemic had exposed the fragility of our economic system. Supermarket shelves were empty, and people were queuing for basic necessities. It had laid bare the deep inequalities that plagued our nation. The gap between the wealthy and the poor was more evident than ever. Biden inherited an economy in crisis. Factories were closed and business buildings stood deserted. The unemployment rate was at a staggering 6.3%, a stark reminder of the millions who had lost their livelihoods. People were desperate for work, and the job market was in disarray. The economy had shrunk by 3.5% in 2020, the sharpest decline since World War II. Consumer confidence had plummeted, shopping malls and restaurants were empty, and the once bustling economy was at a standstill. Businesses were hesitant to invest. The future looked bleak. Office spaces were vacant, and retail shops were abandoned. The COVID-19 pandemic was the primary culprit. Hospitals were overwhelmed, and medical staff were stretched thin. Lockdowns and restrictions, while necessary to curb the virus's spread, had brought economic activity to a near standstill. Supply chains were disrupted, public transport was empty, and cargo ships were docked at ports, unable to move. Demand for goods and services plummeted, marketplaces and restaurants were deserted, and the economy was in free fall. The pandemic's economic fallout was swift and brutal. Business owners were stressed, and financial graphs showed sharp declines. Adding to the turmoil was the political climate. The nation was in a state of unrest, with protests and public arguments becoming a common sight. The country was deeply divided after a contentious election. Political rallies showcased the stark divisions within the nation, with conflicting posters and divided crowds. The outgoing administration had downplayed the pandemic's severity and failed to implement a coherent economic response. This lack of leadership left the country in a precarious position. This left Biden with the daunting task of not only reviving the economy, but also healing a fractured nation. He had to restore hope and confidence in a time of unprecedented crisis. The road ahead was long and fraught with challenges, but the resilience of the American people and the determination of the new administration offered a glimmer of hope for a brighter future. In the face of this unprecedented crisis, Biden acted swiftly and decisively. His first order of business was to address the immediate health crisis that had gripped the nation and the world. He knew that the key to overcoming the pandemic lay in an aggressive and comprehensive vaccination campaign. His administration worked tirelessly to ramp up vaccine distribution, ensuring that vaccines were available to as many people as possible, as quickly as possible. This involved not only increasing the supply of vaccines, but also setting up numerous vaccination sites across the country. From large stadiums to local pharmacies, the goal was to make getting vaccinated as easy and accessible as possible for every American. This was not just a public health imperative, but also an economic one. The pandemic had forced businesses to close and left streets eerily empty, leading to a significant economic downturn. Controlling the virus was essential to reopening businesses and getting Americans back to work. The sooner the virus was under control, the sooner the economy could begin to recover. Biden understood that the pandemic had exacerbated existing inequalities. Many Americans were struggling to make ends meet, with long lines at food banks and rising unemployment rates. He knew that the recovery had to be inclusive and benefit all Americans, not just the wealthy or well-connected. His administration aimed to ensure that the most vulnerable populations received the support they needed. He championed the American Rescue Plan, a $1.9 trillion relief package aimed at providing immediate assistance to struggling families and businesses. This plan was designed to offer a lifeline to those who had been hit hardest by the pandemic. The plan included direct payments to individuals, enhanced unemployment benefits, and aid to small businesses. These measures were intended to provide immediate financial relief and help stabilize the economy. Small businesses, the backbone of the American economy, received much-needed support to help them stay afloat and keep their employees on the payroll. Recognizing the need for long-term economic transformation, Biden also pushed for investments in infrastructure, clean energy, and education. These investments were seen as crucial for building a more resilient and sustainable economy. He argued that these investments would create jobs, boost economic growth, and make the United States more competitive in the global economy. By focusing on infrastructure and clean energy, Biden aimed to lay the foundation for future prosperity. Biden's early actions were met with mixed reactions. While some praised his swift response and focus on helping ordinary Americans, others were more skeptical. Some praised his swift response and focus on helping ordinary Americans. They saw his actions as a necessary and compassionate response to an unprecedented crisis. Others criticized the size of the relief package, arguing that it would lead to inflation and increase the national debt. They were concerned about the long-term economic implications of such massive spending. However, there was no denying that Biden had inherited an economic crisis of epic proportions and was taking bold steps to address it. His administration's actions were aimed at not only addressing the immediate crisis, but also laying the groundwork for a more equitable and prosperous future. The initial months of Biden's presidency saw glimmers of hope emerge from the economic wreckage. The administration faced a daunting task, but there were signs that the economy was beginning to stabilize and even show signs of recovery. The vaccine rollout gained momentum, allowing businesses to reopen and Americans to return to some semblance of normalcy. Vaccination centers were set up across the country, and the public responded with enthusiasm, eager to reclaim their lives and livelihoods. The economy began to add jobs at a record pace. Job fairs saw unprecedented attendance, factories buzzed back to life, and office spaces once again filled with the hum of productivity. This resurgence in employment was a critical indicator of economic health. The unemployment rate steadily declined. Businesses, both large and small, hung now hiring signs in their windows, and job listings flooded online platforms. The sense of optimism was palpable as more people found work and financial stability. By the end of 2021, the economy had grown by 5.7%, the fastest rate in nearly 4 decades. This remarkable growth was a testament to the resilience of the American economy and the effectiveness of the policies implemented. This economic rebound was fueled by a confluence of factors. Government aid, consumer confidence, and business innovation all played pivotal roles in driving the recovery forward. The American Rescue Plan provided a much-needed lifeline to families and businesses. Financial aid checks helped households cover essential expenses, while small businesses received support to keep their doors open and employees on the payroll. Pent-up demand, unleashed by the reopening of the economy, led to a surge in consumer spending. Shopping malls, grocery stores, and retail outlets saw a significant increase in foot traffic as people felt more secure in their financial situations. Low interest rates encouraged businesses to invest and expand. Construction sites for new business ventures became a common sight, and investment plans were discussed in boardrooms across the nation. This wave of expansion was crucial for sustaining long-term economic growth. The stock market, a barometer of investor confidence, reached record highs. Investors were buoyed by the positive economic indicators and the promise of continued growth, leading to a bullish market environment. The Biden administration was quick to tout these economic gains. Press conferences and political rallies highlighted the achievements, with officials emphasizing the positive impact of their policies on the nation's recovery. They argued that their policies, particularly the American Rescue Plan, had been instrumental in preventing a deeper recession and spurring the recovery. The plan's comprehensive approach addressed both immediate needs and long-term economic stability. They pointed to the declining unemployment rate and robust GDP growth as evidence of their success. These metrics were presented as clear indicators that the economy was on the right track. However, the economic recovery was not without its challenges. Empty store shelves and rising prices became a common sight, reminding everyone that the path to full recovery was still fraught with obstacles. Inflation, long dormant, began to rear its head. Economists debated the causes and potential solutions, while consumers felt the pinch in their everyday purchases. Supply chain disruptions, exacerbated by the pandemic and geopolitical events, led to shortages and price hikes. The global nature of these issues meant that no country was immune to their effects. The war in Ukraine further fueled inflation, driving up energy and food prices. The conflict's impact on global markets underscored the interconnectedness of the world's economies and the fragility of the recovery process. Just as the economy seemed to be turning a corner, a new threat emerged: inflation. Prices for everyday goods and services began to rise at an alarming rate. The Consumer Price Index, a key measure of inflation, surged by 7% in 2021, the largest year-over-year increase in 4 decades. Suddenly, the economic recovery felt much less certain. The causes of this inflationary surge were complex and multifaceted. The pandemic had disrupted global supply chains, leading to shortages and higher prices for raw materials and finished goods. The war in Ukraine further exacerbated these supply chain issues, particularly for energy and food. Additionally, strong consumer demand, fueled by government stimulus and pent-up savings, put upward pressure on prices. The Federal Reserve, tasked with maintaining price stability, responded by raising interest rates. The goal was to cool down the economy and bring inflation under control. However, raising interest rates too quickly risked triggering a recession. It was a delicate balancing act. The Biden administration faced growing criticism over its handling of the economy. Republicans blamed the American Rescue Plan for overheating the economy and fueling inflation. They argued that excessive government spending was the root of the problem. Democrats countered that the global nature of inflation, driven by factors beyond Biden's control, proved that their policies were not to blame.